You obviously know Kung Fu.
Returning to the show, filmmaker, director, stunt performer, and most recently the Emmy-nominated stunt coordinator, supervising stunt coordinator for the fourth and final season of the Righteous Gemstones, Cory DeMeyers. Cory, thank you so much for coming back to the show.
Yes, sir. Thanks for having me, man. Always good to chat.
It's good to have you back. So the fourth and final season. Just before we even get into all of the work that you did on that amazing show, when you come into that fourth and final season, then it's got to be a little bit bittersweet. But what is the mindset going into that? Are you like, all right, this is the run. We're all done, or are you thinking, man, we really got to go out with a bang here and leave some of that Corey DeMeyer's magic on screen as part of my legacy?
Oh man, that's a great question. No, I think it's a little bit of both. The team over at the Righteous Gemstones and Rough House is super collaborative, and we've spoke a little bit about that in the past. So, there is opportunities to leave a little bit of my mark and help maybe make that action a little bit bigger, right, this season. But at the same time, my job every time, regardless of if it's the first season, the last season, the middle of a run of seasons, is really to bring the action that's on the page to life for our directors and our writers. So, that's where I start. But yeah, man, in the back of my mind, there's a little bit of like, can we leave a little sauce, a little stank on this thing?
A little Corey DeMeyer's thing. That's awesome. Well,
Yeah.
to go into the season then with Bradley Cooper right there and a whole Civil War scene that I haven't seen since Blue and the Gray with Patrick Swayze way back when. What was that like when you knew that that was the challenge that you were facing right off the bat?
Exciting. That was very, very exciting. No, yeah, it was funny. Like they were trying to get a big name for that spot, and we didn't know exactly who was going to be in there during the first couple of weeks of prep until they locked in Bradley Cooper. And I think the sequence itself, the sequences we were doing in the Civil War in the action department in the stunt department, were going to be an exciting piece, and they were going to be challenging for us to accomplish. And then I think it made it even more exciting when we found out that we got Bradley Cooper. Because, look, not only is he just a huge name and a massive celebrity, but he's a real and true professional through and through. And that was one of my favorite experiences working with an actor on a show, whether it was television or feature, was working with him and just seeing how professional he was and how dialed in he was and how interested in creating magic he was. It was inspiring me, to do my best job for him.
That's cool. Now, let's get into that scene though. Again, a Civil War battle, a lot of craziness in there, tons of extras, explosions that you typically see in film. Uh, can you walk us through the planning and the execution of that whole thing, especially since you were doing it like, again for television? What were some of the challenges that you had to face in trying to capture all of that and make it an emotional impact as well for the audience?
Yeah, well, to start right off, I've done a little bit of everything along my career, and I'm very thankful for that. And I feel like oftentimes I'm kind of a Swiss Army man, whether I'm performing or coordinating. But one thing I hadn't really worked with was horses, right? And horses are a real big part of the Civil War in that era of America and American history. And so I know a couple of wranglers, and I can know a couple of stunt performers who work very intimately with horses. And so the first thing that I did was start reaching out to those guys. But the show had already brought in a wrangler to work with us, and I didn't know him or get to meet him until we're about 2 weeks out from that sequence. And so our first couple of conversations, we got to know each other. So that was my first order of business: is let's meet the wrangler, let's meet his team of wranglers because we're going to be working together. And Danny had some horsework that he wanted to integrate into these sequences that directly involved the stunt department. And look, Kenneth was amazing, and I hope Kenneth and I get to work together again. He's based out of Asheville, North Carolina, and his team, they're not all from Asheville. They're some of the best wranglers in the business, doing horse shows all over the world. And I said to him, I said, Kenneth, look, here's the deal. You and I are partners on this. And whatever you need to be successful, I'm gonna do everything in my power to get that for you, and you let me know what I can and cannot do with your team and your horses, because we have some action that we want to create with them, and I think we can strike a nice balance." And he said, "All right, partner, you got it." And we were able to do some amazing stuff together. And he had worked on things like, Hateful Eight and Ridiculous Six and all kinds of westerns in the last 10 years. So I knew I was in good hands with him. And as usual, as a stunt coordinator, brother, like, our job is to give our team what they need to be successful and step back and look at the big picture and make sure everything's being executed properly. So order one of business. Order two was Danny wanted this to be a oneer, right?
Yeah.
And in our first couple of production meetings, even in the scout, I think the expectation from a lot of people was like, "Oh yeah, a rehearsal day. We're going to shoot it in a day." And eventually, my experience with the oneers is, if we're going to get this and we're going to try to do it properly, and we don't want to go over time and over budget, we're going to actually save time and money if we get the appropriate rehearsal time. And we were standing out in the field one day, and I said, "Hey guys, here's what I think Danny's trying to accomplish, and here's what it's going to take to accomplish that vision." Um, and and everybody, I think, was a little more surprised at how much was going to be involved in prepping the sequence. But at the end of the day, what we ended up getting, and it worked amazingly, was 1 week of rehearsal with our stunt team. And I was borrowing our Wranglers whenever we could, because they were working on set. So we were already shooting the sequence. I'm sorry, the episode. Now I was able to bring our stunt team out for an entire week to rehearse the gags within the sequence and start blocking out what some of that choreography was going to be in the oneer. And even earlier before that, I bought a bunch of Civil War soldiers. I ordered Civil War Army men. I got horses from Richard Wright, our production designer. He gave me fences and trees. And on my island in my rental, I set up the battlefield. And I started using sticky notes for, like, there's going to be a mortar explosion here. This is where the saddle fall is going to happen. This is where the ratchet's going to happen. I literally marked everything out and did my own visual war map in my kitchen counter. And I shot a previs of that actually on my iPhone, put music and explosions to it. And then I shot an overhead as well and sketched out on my iPad where the dolly tracks were and everything, and pitched that to Danny. And once Danny approved that, that's what we did.
Yeah, we have a picture of that actually, and I'll share that on the video. But there's this whole layout on the kitchen counter with figures and horses and fences. It's amazing. But again, that's the kind of detail that you have to pay attention to. And I think this was like three takes that you had to stitch together to make it look like a oneer. Is that right?
Yeah, that's correct. And the reason we did that instead of a true oneer was because we were doing saddle falls right off the top. So we had two stuntmen on horses, well, three stuntmen on horses riding through. So one guy leads the horses. So that way when the guys come off the horses and they do their saddle fall, the horses follow, right? And they have somewhere to go. And then we have additional wranglers off camera to grab those horses. And the one thing that I was concerned about was everyone's safety, right? Like, look, like, we have some tough sons of guns on the back of those horses, and they've done these before. But taking a freaking header or a backfall off of a horse to the deck while it's running at full speed doesn't feel good. And the more we do it, right, the more opportunity we have for something to go wrong, right? So it's a numbers game. We can be as safe as possible, have the best guys, but the more takes you do, the higher the probability is that something can go wrong, right? You get it in one or two, you're good. So my pitch was, in order to limit the probability of something going wrong, we should break the sequence up into 2 or 3 shots, however many we deem necessary. And what that's going to do is it's going to eliminate points of failure in the sequence. So if these guys do the saddle fall and we want to keep running through the next part of the sequence, and something goes wrong down the line, and they want to back camera up and go again, those guys have to do that saddle fall again, right? And it's the same thing as, we had a guy on a ratchet. I mean, doing a high PSI ratchet at the end of the sequence. Okay, saddle falls go great. We get to the ratchet doesn't go well. Well, shit, our guys got to do the ratchet again, and we got to go all the way back and do the saddle falls again. And so we found 2 different points to stitch, so that way we could do these more dangerous stunts and allow our performers to do them the minimal amount of times, right? Um, So at the end of the day, it was three sections. Each section we shot two times, right? And I think we were able to do that because, I had also requested and Danny approved and our production team approved rehearsal day with camera. And so I asked for our reenactors and a camera test day. And I believe we had about 220 feet of dolly track. They brought out the camera. I had an operator, a first AC, a second AC, our dolly grip, VFX supervisor and an AD, and I ran those camera tests for 6 hours the Friday before we shot. So I believe we shot that sequence on a Monday or Tuesday, and that Friday we got to run a camera test. And so I shot the sequence with our stunt team and our wranglers and our not our background. I'm sorry, we didn't have them until the day, but our reenactors. And we delivered that to Danny on first unit, and they were able to kind of stitch them low key together on the rehearsal day. And I sat with Danny and the rest of the team at first unit in between takes, and we ran through the sequence and what we wanted to tweak. We want the camera just a little bit lower. Okay, we'll do that. And then on the day, Danny let me run that show with Randall, our first AD, and we got everything done and two takes per section and wrapped that scene before lunch. And I'm really freaking proud of it, man. I'm really, really proud of that sequence.
You should be, and kudos to your editor too, because I didn't even notice that it was three takes just going through that scene. So well done.
Yeah, it was amazing, and we picked some great spots for it, right? Like kind of explosions. One, so I'll run you through it if that's okay, right?
Absolutely.
100 background actors, 20 reenactors, 12 wranglers on horses, and 13 stuntmen in that scene is what we had. We did two saddle falls off the top. We did a ratchet that went about. I mean, I want to say he went about 20 feet up in the air and 30 feet out, right?
Wow.
And then those were black powder muskets. So we had all the stunt performers, except for the guys taking Rex, were trained on how to load and shoot those black powder muskets. We had a black powder team along with an armorer. And then we had Cannon Bob, who comes out of Ohio. He's one of two men in the United States that are licensed to own these real cannons
Wow.
and to fire them. And so those cannons were firing black powder. So we were shooting black powder out of those cannons. And with the right team, I want to reiterate, because I know there's been a few, an incident in more recent years with the right team, with the proper experience and preparation. These things can be done safely. They don't need to go away. They just need to be handled properly with the right team.
Sure.
You can't cut corners on safety. And then our special effects team uh, laid in a ton of mortars. And so we blocked that sequence around our horses. We worked with the Humane Society and our representatives who have worked with horses in these sequences before to make sure that when we were doing the gunfire and the explosions, that the horses were comfortable doing that and everything was at a safe distance and the loads were at a safe sound level to not spook the horses as well and stress them out. And we ran that sequence from the top. It horse rides through frame, saddle fall, couple of pieces of gunfire, and then there's a cannonball that hits in frame, and that was our first stitch point. And what was interesting about that stitch point is it wasn't the full. It didn't take over the screen,
Mhm.
right? But it filled a portion of the screen, and so we use that as a stitch point, right?
Cool.
And then the next section, which we kind of called our section two, our center section, runs through some cannon fire, guys getting shot in the foreground. And it goes all the way through until another cannon blast goes off, but from the Confederate side toward the Union soldiers. And when that cannon goes off, what happens is there's a guy loading the cannon. He gets hit and
Yeah.
falls over. The cannon goes off, and we ricochet the cannon and the plunger that rips through frame, hits the fence that's right in front of us in the foreground, and sends shrapnel into camera frame. That was our second stitch point. And then
Nice.
everything from there on out, there's no additional stitch. And we get into that ratchet with our performer landing in the frame and then
Yeah.
our actor getting dragged out with no leg. And yeah, I think it turned out really well, man. Like it made me want to do a period piece.
No, it actually did turn out really, really great. The that last actor that gets thrown right at the screen too kind of shook me for a second because I wasn't expecting it. So I actually it was like a little jump scare for me. It was well done.
Awesome. Awesome, man. Yeah, that's what we're going for. And you know what's funny is that ratchet's kind of gnarly. And I didn't we tried a bunch of different versions, right? So I mean, Troy Castaneda, who's one of my brothers, he's a friend of mine. He's in the International Stunt Association with me. Um, he's so talented. He did circ. He's like a level 10 gymnast, but he also used to drive race cars in Europe, right? Like this dude's done everything. And he probably did 40 freaking rehearsals. Boom, just getting blasted. And we did gooch wraps, right? Straight over the top. We did long pulls where he kind of flew more straight. And we had something we thought was going to be realistic. We showed Danny in person. Danny was like, "Yeah, that's cool, but like, do you have anything crazier?" He goes, "I just want something crazy." And yeah, and so we did, dude. We did a double, like a gooch and a double wrap, and just sent him. And he's got such great air awareness that we were able to dial it in with our rigging team, and Troy, to get it consistent. And yeah, I think he smashed it. But Danny wanted something a little larger than life, and that's what we gave him. And I think in the end, it worked really well for the sequence and got lots of gasps. You know.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. Got one from me for sure. Now, back to Bradley Cooper. Were you able to work with him on any of the stunts in this particular scene? I mean, again, with everything that was going on and with that kind of star power, were you able to? Was he game first of all to get down and dirty with you guys?
Oh God, yes. Oh, he was so game, man. Look, we showed him we showed him the previs that we did. So our previs level was me with my map, me with my phone. Then I worked with the digital artist to do it, and then we shot one. So I was able to actually show him the previs of the ambush sequence. So he wasn't in the oneer, but he's in the ambush sequence toward the end of the episode. And so we previs the ambush sequence with him as well, or with him in mind. And the real thing is they wanted to be able to push him and pull him through the entire sequence and kind of let it live in the push and the pull, and then maybe a few little vignette pieces intercut in there. And so I showed Bradley the previs. We let him walk through it with the team because it was all stunt performers in that wagon train in between his path from his guy getting shot in the head at the back of that wagon
Oh
to
yeah.
landing behind the wheel and hiding. It was all stunt performers, right? And we dressed our background in the edges of the woods, so that way he could move through that. Our guys were going to keep him safe, and even though they're fighting each other and shooting each other, they've got him in their peripherals. But at the same time, we were comfortable with him putting his hands on our performers and moving them as necessary.
Cool.
And we knew that our guys were going to be able to adjust to that. So we showed him it. I think the week before we shot it, we were able to show it to him and walk it with him. And then we rewalked it with him on the day, and kind of keyed in the performers that he could get handsy with if he wanted to move them around. And yeah, he was game. He baseball slid behind that wheel, and he was down to get to. He's a great performer, and he's a good person. He was just so pleasant to work with on set, and wanted to do whatever it took to make the scenes work. But also was very, I will say, very caring and compassionate.
Yeah.
That scene with Kimball Farley. Yeah, with Kimball when he kills him and strangles him. We were trying to make that look violent, and those guys did a really good job. But he was very aware and concerned of who was in the scene with him, right? And
Right.
he wanted to make sure he was taking care of him. And even when we let him rehearse it with our stunt double, who's a friend of mine from the parkour world, Jesse LaFleur, um, he's like, "Are you okay? Are you sure this is okay? I just want to make sure I'm taking care." So he was very aware and cognizant of taking care of everybody, whether they're a stunt performer or an actor, and that's always appreciated. Look, we're tough, but we like it when you think about us too.
That's awesome. That's awesome. By the way, he does such a great job of delivering his lines and keeping in character. That scene that you talked about with the guy in the back of the wagon where he takes that bullet, that's another one where I was like, "Whoa, what happened there?" And Brad just, in stride, so well done.
Oh, it's amazing. It was amazing. And he plays it straight, but it's still funny. He really does, and that episode I think needed that, right? Like
Yeah.
you didn't want to let the humor get too big. It should be subtle, kind of pointed humor in this like very serious setting. And yeah, he delivered, man.
Now, speaking of delivering with all of the action on the ground there for the Civil War, in the next episode, we take it to the air in some of the craziest jetpack sequences I've ever seen. You got to talk me through that because for a guy that is a free running world champion, the world of rigs and wires has to be like anathema to you. But with these sequences, you got like 13 different wire rigs. You got 1.5 miles of tech line. Is that
Just
right?
about. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I mean, talk to me about the complexity of all of that and what had to go into getting the actors ready to do all of that rigging and make that flying sequence really take off, so to speak.
Well, yeah, absolutely. So no, it's funny. It's I come from that free running world, and so I did a lot of stuff with no wires. One of my buddies used to Jet Jansen Fernandez. I actually have a short film that's premiering this coming week that he directed. But Jet used to call me No Wires DeMeyers, right? That was
Nice.
his that was a silly nickname for me. But I've ridden a lot of wires, So ironically enough, I've jumped off buildings with and without wires throughout my career, on and off camera, and so I have a decent amount of knowledge with the wire work from a performer's perspective. I've helped set up rigs, but I'm not a key rigger myself, right? I know enough I know enough to collaborate with our rigging team, and I also know enough when I'm performing that I can look at the rig and follow things back and have an understanding of how it's going to work or how it's supposed to work, and I can ask the right questions to the team to help them get the desired result as well. So. For this sequence, I brought in my friend Kyle Weissar and Bryant Burnett. And Kyle was one of the stunt coordinators and key riggers on the most recent Matrix movie, and he was responsible for the rig with Keanu and Carrie Ann jumping off the building in San Francisco, right? So I was bringing in heavy hitters to help us with this sequence because we knew that we wanted to have stunt performers taking good recs, but we also knew that we wanted to have our actors on the rigs and riding them as much as possible. So Kyle actually came in and started like prep with me toward the end of prep. Him and the rigging team worked with me, which I say the rigging team is it was Kyle and Bryant. So it was two people. So they came in and set up the ratchet on the Civil War, and I was able to slide them into a few of the sequences in that as well. They ran the ratchet, but also played in the Gatling gun scene. They get killed, and the ambush as well. And as soon as we wrapped the Civil War, we had about 3 weeks of rigging testing and rehearsing that we were able to muster up in the schedule at that Coliseum. So immediately when the Civil War wrapped, those two went to the Coliseum and started running line. But the challenges we faced were that the set pieces weren't built yet. So
Oh,
that Coliseum set has been the same every year, right? All 4 seasons they haven't changed the prayer center, but they're big pieces that have to get loaded into that space. So the grip rigs, the lighting rigs were not flown in the air yet, right? The set wasn't finished being built yet. So we were rigging, testing, and rehearsing alongside, our rigging grips, flying grids, and putting lights up in the air, and our construction department building out the actual set piece. So I would say that was one of the biggest challenges for us was getting our lines up and making sure that we weren't impeding in their grids, but also their grids weren't affecting what our director wanted to accomplish. And that's something that they've had in there every year. So they can't change the lighting setup, right? Like that is what the
right.
prayer center looks like. Um, so that was some of our biggest challenges. And then to make it work properly, we had 13 different rigs, right?
Wow.
So we had two systems, and that's why we had roughly 13 different rigs. So we had two systems. One system was for Adam and Edie, right? Because we choreographed most of their movements to happen at the same time, right? Whatever they were doing. So we were able to put the two of them on one system that was operated by a high-speed winch, and then we were able to put Danny on another system that was operated by a high-speed winch. So we had two winches. Which operated, all three performers in total. We didn't have enough to do a 3D flying rig, right? We would need two more winches to be able to do 3D flying. And so what we did is we did counterbalanced rigs that you would see in a lot of theater productions. We had hand lines that performers were puppeting our actors on as well.
Wow.
That had counterbalanced weight on them to make our performers easier to move with one person or two people on the line. And so it was a combination of high speed winches, hand pull lines, counterweighted lines, and over 7,000 feet of tech line, which starts pushing toward a mile and a half of line strung in the building. Um, and yeah, dude, it was crazy. I mean, I don't know what else to say. I mean, about the complications of it, We had like it was our two riggers that were with us the whole time, Kyle and Bryant. Then we brought in two additional riggers to help string lines, and carried one of our friends over from the Civil War to do that, Jason Gray, who's a good friend of mine and covered some of our sets on Halloween Ends. And um, and then once we got everything in the air and it was time to start operating the lines, we did it with that same team. And our Tate winch operator, Danny, who's essentially a computer programmer for those winches, right? And she writes code to make all that flying
Oh,
happen
wow.
once we design the rigs. And then when it was time to shoot it with our actors, we brought in four more additional riggers because we wanted to make sure everybody had two people per line, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So you got to back your systems up and have additional safeties. And so we wanted to make sure each performer had at least two people on their line. I'm watching, Kyle's watching, Danny's operating the winches. So that redundancy, you know. And Adam, Edie, and Danny did a ton of flying.
Yeah.
And yeah, we flew them as much as possible. And then for the Rex, we flew their doubles. And then, toward the end of the week of shooting, when we were doing that episode, if it was things that we weren't going to necessarily see our actors' faces in, then we flew our doubles because, as you probably know, harnesses aren't the most comfortable thing. Even if you're a stunt performer, and they're even less comfortable the more days in a row you have to wear them.
Yeah, yeah.
So, there's ways to make them more comfortable, but after 12-hour days of being in a harness, 3, 4 days in a row, it really starts to suck.
Yeah, there aren't many ways to make them more comfortable, I'll tell you that, right?
Nah,
So,
no, no,
but
there's not.
now speaking to that though, not a huge crew for something as complicated. So kudos to the coordination of getting all of that to work. At any point when you're standing there looking at it, did you ever feel like this is a little bit much for these guys?
Yeah, look, it's always a little bit much, right? Like it always feels that way, and until it's done. You're like, gosh,
Sure.
this is like we're really taking on a lot here. But no, I didn't think that it was something that our team couldn't handle. You know what I mean? And that's why we bring in the best. I mean,
Yeah,
to be
yeah.
honest, like I know you probably hear that a lot too, but our job is to build the best team and to lay the absolute best plans that we can within the guidelines that we have to accomplish these things. And so, we do that by bringing in experts in their departments, and collaborating with them. And positive collaboration and positive growth is what we aim for. And that's something that Kevin Scott, who's a second unit director and one of my mentors, used to always say to me. And it's worked out for us, And early on, we built that sequence with Jody and our VFX coordinator, our VFX supervisor Bruce, with action figures. Again, we
Yeah.
sat in the office and said, Jody, what do you want to see? Like, here's what we could do. And so we built that routine in the office with him, with GI Joes essentially. Uh, and then when we got in the space, we were able to put those things on the line with performers and show them those tests. And once we got the approval, then we're running.
That's crazy. Now, the cast once they had to do some of that flying. Again, how keen were they on doing what needed to be done to get those shots? Because again, like you said, it's not a comfortable thing to be in those harnesses, right? So, what was
No.
their take on all that?
Well, look, they were all game. 100%. I mean, if I'm being completely honest, they were all down. No, nobody did not want to do it. Edie had never flown before. Adam had been in a harness a few times in his career. Danny's been in a harness a few times in his career. So they understood what it was about, but it's still really important to bring them in and give them the rehearsal time. So we brought Adam and Edie in for about an hour, put them on the rig, let them go up and down, flew them across the Coliseum, right? We had like 100-ish foot rig that flew him out to the center of the Coliseum from the stage. So we did that with them. And then we did the same thing with Danny. And we made sure to continue to educate them on how the systems worked, right? I think that's really important, especially with wire work, whether you're a stunt person or an actor, is to have an understanding of how this thing works, because that makes you feel more comfortable. I think fear comes from not knowing. Right. So oftentimes that's what I found. And it's like if you can educate people and let them know how something works, they're going to be a little more comfortable throughout the process, right? Because now they know.
Yeah.
Um, so we got them on the lines. tested everything with their doubles. And then the same thing on the day is we would put their doubles on the line first, lift them, do a version of what our actors were going to do, pull them off, put them on. Um, but to add to, the discomfort, those jetpacks were heavy, man. Like they were, right? And so you're not just doing, for our actors, you're not just flying uh, in a harness. You have another, 28
Yep,
or
yep.
35 pounds on your back that's kind of pulling on you, sitting you in that harness more, so it becomes more and more uncomfortable. But they all did it. They lasted, all 3 or 4 days of shooting that sequence. Um, Never were mad, right? They never got mad. Definitely a little uncomfortable at times, and but they were champions, and our team was great. Ashley Reddick, Mike Endoso, and Steve Legate have been the doubles for our three siblings most of the 4 seasons, and they take care of their actors. I constantly check in with them, but the doubles as well. They're always checking in, making sure their actors are comfortable, they're good. You want to loosen your harness, you want to get out of your harness for a little bit. So, having a good team supporting me and supporting the actors is very important, and it worked to our advantage during that sequence.
No, that's cool. Now, the other conscious decision that you guys made for that whole sequence was you did away with any green screening. Why,
Yeah.
why? Why did it need to be so practical for you?
I mean, I think it was also more of a scheduling thing than anything else. Because if we were going to
100%.
shoot, if we were going to shoot green screen flying, we'd have to add days to the schedule specifically for the green screen work. Whereas if we could fly the performers in the Coliseum in line while shooting the rest of the scene, then it saves time, right? And
Yeah.
practical is always better, right?
Oh yeah, yeah.
I really, I mean, look, it's not gonna, that sequence would not be possible without our VFX friends, right? It wouldn't be. And I think I said this to you last year as well. Bruce is a filmmaker himself, our VFX supervisor, and he and I have become good friends over this show. And he also agrees whatever we can do for real, we should do for real, and they'll
Yeah.
enhance it. Or if we can do some of this stuff in the real world and they can do a takeover in the real world, it's going to be so much better, right? And, I think the smoke and mirrors works better when you're able to do it on location than go do it on a green screen. We're not making a sci-fi show or a fantasy
Yeah.
show, so. It was cool to do practical flying. And I was like, dude, people aren't going to believe us because it's shot so well and it's
Yeah.
lit so well that the lighting in that sequence is so dreamy, right? That you're like, at times I was like, man, like it almost feels like this could have been a green screen, but this is just so beautiful because we did it in the location and the lighting and the cinematography is so awesome,
It is. It is. It definitely is. You brought up something, and I want to pick your brain on it while I have you. Uh, with the onslaught of AI, are you ready for what that may do to your industry and filmmaking in general? Because I I don't think it's ready for prime time personally, but some people do.
Yeah, I don't look, man. I don't think that AI is ready for prime time, just yet. I also don't know if people are going to be interested in watching, AI generated content 100%. Look, is it going to
Agreed.
be a part of the market? 100%. It has its place in the market, right? There's Disney and Pixar have been doing animation forever, right? Um, there's fans of anime. That's a different medium. That's not the same thing that Disney and Pixar are putting out, right? So I think it has a place in the business. It does. Is it going to reduce the number of people working? 100%, and it already has, right? But I'll tell you personally, I don't want to go watch a drama that is AI generated. I want to see
Yeah.
actors emoting, right? I'm there for the story and the craft, right?
Yeah.
I appreciate, I don't think people want to go to the theater, and I don't mean the movie theater, the theater, and watch robots
Yeah.
performing, you know what I mean? Shakespeare. So, in the same way, I don't think the audience wants to watch AI generated characters um, 100%, right?
Sure.
So I do think it's gonna continue to move into our space. I do think it's going to continue to eliminate some of the people working in our business, unfortunately. But I think it's forcing the industry to find itself again. and Seth Rogen said it in recent interviews too. People have always been nervous for their jobs in film. The film industry has evolved in the last 100+ years that it's existed. It's had to re-identify a few different times, and I think that's what we're going through. And I think if you're legitimately passionate about filmmaking, if you're legitimately passionate about what you do in this industry or what you want to do in this industry, and you take the steps to become good at that thing, right? Like actually good, because you can't just have passion. That can't be your only skill set. Um, I think that you will continue to find your way in this industry and there will be a place for you. But you have to be passionate about it and then you have to take the appropriate steps to become good at it, right? And I think the cream will rise to the top and we'll be okay. It's scary right now, but I think we're going to be all right.
Now, and you clearly have the passion for the craft. Looking back on your work over this final season, again, it's got to be somewhat bittersweet there. But are there things that you look back on where you're like, man, super, super proud of that? And what do you want the audience to take away from a show like this, where they might not think that stunt coordination went into it very heavily? What do you want them to take away from the seasons that you were supervising?
Well, it's funny you bring that up because I've been contemplating this concept. I said comedy in stunts enhances the joke, right? Or stunts in comedy enhances the joke.
Yeah.
Stunts in action is the thing you're watching,
Hmm?
right? So it's a character, right? So in an action film, stunts are their own character, and it's something that's being paid attention to. But when we do these comedy shows, it becomes an enhancement to the joke. So
Yeah.
I think the level of skill and professionalism that goes into accomplishing that stunt kind of gets lost in translation at times. And there's no difference between what we're doing on the Righteous Gemstones when it comes to skill level and difficulty level of the gags that we're doing than your favorite action movies. It's just being framed in a different way
Yeah.
because it's in a comedy and not an action film. Does that make sense? So
Absolutely.
I'm kind of stoked you asked that because it's something I've been thinking about and something that I've been wanting to bring up in these conversations. Um, and so all that to be said, things I'm proud of. Well, last season, I'm super proud of the naked fight we did with BJ. I really am. Like that was a brutal, heartfelt, gut wrenching fight in a comedy, right? And it still was funny, but it told the story we needed it to tell, and it felt hard, right? And it wasn't a karate fight. It was a man who was hurt and was passionate and was trying to like regain some of his dignity back, right? From this man who had stole it from him. I'm super proud of the car chase that we did in season 3, the pipe ramp and the sidewinder, and everything that the team did there, the monster truck work, and then this season, I mean, 7,000 feet of tech line, 13 rigs, flying actors. Flying stunt performers, and then the Civil War sequences. We did a Civil War oneer with some stitches, but we did real saddle falls, and we ratcheted a guy on location through a battlefield while things were blowing up, and you know we got to do 11 guys with like 40 squibs with a Gatling gun, and we did some cool stuff, man. And so I think I just would like, look, we're behind the scenes guys and we're getting a little more shine the last couple of years and that's nice. But I guess it's not what I want. I hope the audience appreciates uh, how the action and the stunts enhance the comedy
Yeah.
in shows like The Righteous Gemstones, right? And then I hope my peers can see the work that I've put into this show and the level of quality we bring to the comedy, and would be interested in giving me an opportunity to do an action film, right? And
Yeah.
I've done them in the past, and I've been doing comedy lately. But what we're doing is on the level, and I would love an opportunity to get out there and do another film like Project Power, where we get to design insane shootouts and martial arts fight sequences. So I guess if there's anything personal, that would be the personal request. Is I hope my peers see what we've done and see that this is up to snuff and are open to bringing me in and hanging out with me, whether I'm the fight coordinator or the stunt coordinator. I want to dive back into action a little bit.
Yeah, it helps that you have that Emmy nomination hanging over you too, right?
Yeah, yeah. You would think. So let's keep our fingers crossed.
So, where do you go from here? Then you have to say goodbye to the Righteous Gemstones. But what's on the plate for you?
So, it is bittersweet because the cast and crew are amazing on that show, but the Rough House guys have been really awesome to me. So I've had an opportunity over the last like 2.5, 3 years to work on several of their television shows, their commercials. So I do think I'll be seeing Danny and David Green and Jody again.
Nice.
Um, Immediately after I did a show when we wrapped in LA with Jody Hill called Famous, starring Zach Efron. So that was a great time. We got a chance to hang out for a couple of weeks here in LA and shoot a movie. But yeah, man, I've just been working on personal projects. I've directed a few little things here and there. I just dropped a Nike Spec commercial yesterday that got like 20,000 views on Instagram, which is cool.
Nice.
Yeah, UTA Productions actually picked it up and reposted it. So I'm really grateful for that. Um, but yeah, I'm just working on personal creative projects in between. And actually, April 8th, we're premiering a short film called Blue Evening that one of my best friends in the world wrote and directed, Jet Jansen Fernandez, and it's starring Karrion Cross from the WWE.
Yep.
Um, so he's stepping out and doing some film work now. And yeah, we're really stoked to screen that. I was one of the executive producers on it and also the post production supervisor. So um, yeah, that's it, man. Just trying to stay creative in between and see what's next.
All right. Speaking of what's next, and this is my last point here, so before I let you go, but there's been some rumors now that the Marvel Blade project has been canceled. I know the last time we talked, you had a whole vampire martial arts
I know.
actioner in your head. So if there's a time to bring it out, I think now has to be it.
Maybe it is, bro. Maybe I go get some of the team together and shoot a super sick fight previs of like one of those sequences, and we start pitching. Uh, yeah, dude, I would love that. I think that's like one of my next short films. I do want to do an action thing. I've done a couple of like little comedies. I've done a few little dramas, and so I think I do need to do a little action piece next, maybe with some swords, and then
Yes.
we can start pitching.
That would be amazing. Corey, thank you so much for taking some time out. Amazing work on the Righteous Gemstones. Best of luck with everything that you have going on. I will be on the lookout for that vampire martial arts blade work. So do your thing, and I'll be a fan for as long as you keep making awesome stuff.
You got it, bro. Thanks for having me. Always good talking.
Hup! Poison Clan rocks the world.